there was a big analysis of where Belize is in terms of early childhood development. And we were looking at the growth and development of young children from birth until about 8 years old. Out of that analysis came a realization that the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, Human Development and other departments were working in isolation. That although we were all doing something with early childhood, we were doing different and sometimes conflicting activities and had different and conflicting strategies and policies. So around 2015, there was a decision to create a combined early childhood strategy plan, which would bring together personnel from different ministries, with the idea that we would identify some core governmental commitments to young children, how to ensure that they all have the best start in life, and how to coordinate activities across the sector. As we did this, we began to realize that there was a lack of good information about the lives of early childhood. We did, for example, know how many children were attending school, how many babies were going to clinics, and how many were being vaccinated. But when we began to look at more qualitative aspects of the young child's life, how they were learning, what their home life was like, how they were being nurtured and sustained within families, it was clear that there was a lack of data. As it happens, about the same time, the 2015 mixed survey was published. And for us, that was a real treasure trove because the mix being a household survey and being a large household survey, it was providing the kind of data that you cannot easily get from the usual statistics, which is just counting what people are doing. So one example that springs to mind is there is a question under the mixed survey about how many books young children have at home. And that is telling us, how many books children have at home and how many books which are appropriate for their age that children have at home is telling us a lot about the activities that families are doing with their young children. And for Belize, the figures were, to us, quite surprising. There are very, very few books in the household. Why that then is relevant to the planning for early childhood is we could identify a real need to change the way that parents engage with their young children when it comes to their health and welfare and development. And it led to a kind of shift in our thinking from seeing the role of the parent in an early childhood to making sure the child is well fed, or the child is clothed, or the child is being taken to the clinic for vaccination, to understanding that the family has a much greater role in the early years in nurturing development in learning, development in literacy. What Mix was telling us about the culture or the absence of culture of playing with young children began to open the eyes of policymakers that maybe a different approach was required. So the Intersectoral Early Childhood Strategic Plan was launched in 2017 and covers a period 2017 to 2021. So we are now looking to develop the next strategic plan and so looking for more updated information. And what that plan did was identify specific deliverable outputs that each ministry would attempt to achieve within that time period. One particular initiative was Care for Child Development. And Care for Child Development is a training course which aims to change the way that caregivers interact with young children. And initially the training course was focused on professionals who come into contact with young children. So community health workers, preschool teachers, roving caregivers, social workers, daycare providers and the like. Because the mix was telling us that stimulating activities don't appear to be a routine part of what is happening in the household with very young children, we're looking for ways to change that dynamic. So the Care for Child Development training program, and I think that's one of the most successful, did manage to provide training for most of those professionals that I had previously mentioned. And now we are looking to go to the next stage, which is delivering that training directly to parents in various settings. One of the problems in development work is, unless you're counting something very statistical, like the number of children attending a clinic, it's often difficult to know whether the projects are being successful. In the past, it's often been the case that a project was determined to be successful if the activities were carried out and the money was spent. What was lacking was a way of measuring, for example, change in how parents are treating young children. And that is where the mixed data is particularly rich. So we are looking forward to the next set of data, and hopefully we'll be able to see that, for example, fathers are spending more time engaged in play-based activity with 2 and 3-year-olds, or that the number of books in each household that are actively being used by parents reading to their children has gone up over a period of time. And when we see that data, we'll be able to say, well, actually that was a good project, it was a good initiative, it was worth spending the money, and then maybe we will invest in it further to try to increase the impact. Or we will say, okay, we ran a project and it did not seem to change the way that people behave, and therefore it's time to discontinue it and stop further spending money on that initiative. And in many ways, data that tells us that a project did not work is as or more valuable than data that tells you something is working, because we have limited resources and we want to spend the resources in the ways which are most effective.